Miles Morales, Spider-Gwen, and more are back in the sequel to 2018's Into the Spider-Verse, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, but this time they're bringing along the largest cast of Spider people ever assembled. But does this movie live up to the hype of the Oscar-winning original film? What's up, guys? Welcome back to the MontyVerse. We just saw Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and we're here to talk about it. This is going to be a non-spoiler review, so no worries about any spoilers going forward. But Nicki, why don't you start? What are your quick thoughts on the film?
I really enjoyed it. I think, first and foremost, what you can't take away from this film, and the first one especially, is the animation. It is gorgeous, but what they do in this film, even I think in some moments, transcends the first one. And honestly, I got a lot of laughs out of this. There's definitely some heart-wrenching moments. I think this is like such a complete package and very much a Spider-Man film, like probably even more so than the first one.
What blows my mind about this film is that when it comes to animation, I firmly believe that Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse redefined animation for this generation of filmmaking, because every animated movie that kind of has come out after that has been trying to live up to the excellence that that film was able to achieve. And yet somehow this film takes that and ups the ante even further. Like, the animation in this film is gorgeous. Not only that, but what was so unique about the first film is the comic book influence. That's back in this film very heavily, I might add. There's tons of awesome and amazing comic book references for all of my fellow comic book readers out there. And so there's not only that aspect of it, but the fact that we were able to visit so many different Earths outside of Earth 1610, which is the Earth that Miles from and is the ultimate Earth from Marvel Comics, that we get to see those animation styles come to life in different ways than we did in the first movie.
Absolutely. I think there's definitely a greater variety of those styles as well. And I really feel like they pull no punches in that regard. And I admire them for that, because I think, kind of similar to the first one, there is the possibility that maybe it could come off hokey or like too fan servicey. I think a lot of this worked in favor of it looked gorgeous, and it did contribute to the plot and the overarching theme of the multiverse.
Yes, and not only that, but to play off of that, a lot of the art style in this film kind of played off of different eras of not only animation but of comic books.
Yeah.
There are certain characters from certain eras of comics that kind of reflect the art style of that decade of comic books, I should say. It's no secret that Ben Reilly is in this film, voiced by Andy Samberg, and his animation and the way he's drawn, I think, reflects the art style of the 90s very well, the over muscularity of superheroes during that time. So I think like little things like that, as a comic book fan, I loved.
Yeah, and this may be a little contentious, but something that I truly appreciate about this film that is tied into the designs like that, and per se jokes even, is I think there is a lot of meta humor. A lot of it actually worked even better for me in this film, to where I think this could apply to the first one, but in this one, a lot of the jokes I think anyone could appreciate. Whether you're a comic or Marvel or Spider-Man fan in general, I think a lot of the humor lands very well.
Yes, and Spider-Man is such a huge part of the cultural zeitgeist over the past, like 70, 80 years.
Yeah.
That there's anyone from any generation can find something to love in this film and can find Easter eggs that kind of that'll jump out to them and that'll really catch their eye. But on top of that, there's also like nods to just animation in general.
Yeah. The
design of Miguel O'Hara, something I really loved about his character design, is that I guess on his Earth, or the way that they drew him, they kept, it's almost like he's, you know how sketch artists draw the lines
like intentionally outward?
Yeah, they draw like the face, they call them face lines, so they'll draw like a curved cross shape, and that'll be their guidelines for the eyes and for the facial features. He still has those like and usually when you're done with the sketch, you erase it because you lightly penciled those in, and he still has those like barely erased sketch lines on him, which to me is so awesome that they did that, because it just shows how much like passion and respect they put into properly showing us and like really good animation and drawing. Like, this is a love letter to CG, hand-drawn pop art. Like, it's just like there's so many different things that are covered in this film visually without even talking about the story. We haven't even begun to talk about the story yet.
No.
And what blows my mind is the film looks this good, and they only had a budget of $100 million.
That is shocking to me, what they were able to accomplish with that. Especially, again, like, from so much they had to borrow. It's incredible. It's honestly a feat, I would say, in animation itself, like you said. It's probably going to be one of the best looking films of the year, if not the best looking film of the year. I know, like, and I think, like, it's an uphill battle for any other animated film coming out this year.
Yes, absolutely. But we can talk about the art for literally hours.
Yeah.
It's a gorgeous film. If you were a fan of the art style of the first film, there's more of that and even more on top of that. So that is fully covered. You're going to love that about this film. Let's move on to the story, and then we'll talk a little bit more about the new characters.
Yeah.
I really liked parts of this story. It's so weird because a lot of people are saying like, oh, this has the same exact story as The Flash. And I wouldn't say that. There are story beats that feel similar, but I think this is more of a coming of age story.
Yeah.
It's really Miles trying to find his place in the world.
Also, he and Barry are so drastically different as characters. Like, I completely understand where someone would be coming from with that, but that's what I appreciate, because I think a huge thing that people loved about Into the Spider-Verse in general was kind of the representation with a character like Miles.
Yeah.
And I think, by all means, I get the beats, but I think that, like, is even further emphasized in this film. And especially, like, we have all these other characters from other walks of life, but I think that's what makes him and the story so special.
Yeah, honestly, like, the time we spend with Miles and his family in New York on 1610, it's really amazing because the writers are able to really nail that multicultural household. Like, there's no denying the fact that I'm a New Yorker, and all the New York scenes felt so realistic and felt so true to the essence of the city. And there's so many multicultural families that exist in this area and throughout all the entire world. And I think Miles is a character that kind of represents that mixed household.
Yeah.
And just how great they represented the culture, both sides of Miles' heritage.
Oh, yeah.
I think was really well done. There's a lot of... and there's just a lot of stuff that translates to that's multicultural in terms of parenting, and
like relatable.
Yeah, super relatable. Some of the best scenes, some of the I'm really so glad they gave Miles' parents more to do in this film.
Oh yeah.
I know that Jefferson was featured, Miles' dad, Jefferson Davis, was featured pretty heavily. Like, not heavily, but he was like part of the emotional storyline of the first film, whereas I think is both of Miles' parents have a lot more to do in terms of the overarching story of the film than they did in the first one, which is something I really appreciate.
No, I absolutely adored it, and I'm with you. Those scenes are some of the best, and again, that provides some very natural humor, but also some of those moments are a little bit heart-wrenching at times with the stuff that they're kind of going through, and with him trying to like struggle with his own identity and how he relates to his parents and trying to please them. A lot of that, like, it's like you said, they do a fabulous job relaying it to both cultural aspects of his identity, but it's also just so relatable as an awkward teenager growing up and trying to find their place in the world and dealing with parents that you feel are not gonna understand.
Yeah, and what makes scenes like this so great in a movie like this is because when you deal with things like the Spider-Verse, and for all of my Spider-Man comic readers, the web of life and destiny, which is something from the Spider-Verse comics, it's important to ground our characters.
Yeah.
And I think this movie does a really good job of grounding us emotionally to I would say the two protagonists of this film, which are Miles and Gwen. I think it does a really good job of anchoring us into their stories, so that when we do see like 175 spider people chasing Miles, or traveling the multiverse, visiting Mumbai, Hatton, and other Earths that we see in this film, that we still are connected to the characters, so we're along for the ride, and we're invested no matter what. You could throw anything at us. You can throw spider T-Rexes at us, and we're fully engaged in the story.
Yes. No, absolutely.
Speaking of spider people, we meet we meet a lot of spider people in this film, but there's a few that really stand out in terms of our favorites. Nicki, I'm gonna let you go first. Who are talk about some of your favorite spider people, and if you have a specific spider person in general that you want to shout out.
I mean, I think definitely for me, if I had to pick the MVP of the film, and they're not like a primary character, I would say, but one of the biggest, I would say, is easily Hobie Brown, aka Spider-Punk, voiced by the amazing Daniel Kaluuya.
Absolutely, he's probably my favorite. If not one of my favorites, definitely the scene stealer.
He's the scene stealer. Like, everything that comes out of his mouth is genuinely hilarious, and it's kind of jarring in terms of the tone of the movie, but it works so freaking well. And I'm also just amazed to know that this was an actual comics character.
Yeah, Spider-Punk is real. Spider-Punk is a real character. It's so great. What Daniel Kaluuya is able to do with this character is so fun and is so unique, and I like that. I like how it feels different from the rest of the film, because that's what it's supposed to feel like. Right. I love the art design. I love how they really leaned into the punk aesthetic of the art designed, the art depiction of Hobie in this film. I think he's really great. We talked about Andy Samberg as Ben Reilly. He's more of a gag character than I thought. I thought he was going to be more involved in the story than he was.
Which he does have involvement in it, but but whenever he does have the chance to open his mouth, it's wonderful. Yes,
I would have to say the other huge standout performance is Jason Schwartzman.
Oh God,
as the Spot.
Yes,
he
absolutely.
had way more dialogue than I expected him to have in part 2. I expected him to be heavily featured more in part 3, but how much he was actually involved in the film surprised me, and I really liked his performance.
In general, I think he's a fantastic villain. I think the performance largely is what catapults him to being a standout in this film, because he's so funny, but you also he's weirdly endearing in a very twisted way. Because you do kind of understand where he's coming from in terms of his motivations, but I'm not surprised. Jason Schwartzman is an incredible actor, so what a get for them to have.
Absolutely, and I think all of the returning cast really step up their game from the first movie. I mean, Shameik Moore, he's so good as Miles in this. He's able to show us so many different sides of Miles in this movie that I don't think he was able to due to just story constraints of the first film. He's really able to breathe a little bit more life into the character in this one and really get to stretch his acting muscles.
Yes, and I mean, he had a range of emotion to play with in the first one. I was about to say, he went through some stuff in the first one too, but I think even playing on some of those same emotions in this one, he's so great as this role, and I think you can when stuff is more lighthearted, because they actually touch on that as a joke in this movie, but when stuff gets more desperate, he conveys it so well and so true to this specific character.
Yeah. And that's what I mean to say. Not that Miles wasn't tested in the first movie, but I think that in this movie he gets to show more range as the character of Miles. We run a gamut of emotions with Miles in this movie, and I think that he's up to task of portraying that, and he shines.
I was gonna say, I think everything you said in terms of an emotional gamut, I think that especially applies to Gwen in this film.
Yeah. Haley Steinfeld as Spider-Gwen, Gwen Stacy. Her role is elevated in this film from the first one, and I think she definitely brought her A game to this movie.
Yeah, and I honestly, the whole time watching, I'm not thinking it's Haley Steinfeld or Kate Bishop or anyone else. I think she genuinely owns this role in bringing Gwen to life as a completely unique character, divorced from anything she's done. And she has a lot of stuff that she goes through in this film that I wasn't even expecting, and I really appreciated what they conveyed with that.
Yeah, Oscar Isaac and Jake Johnson, I really liked what they were both doing. I think I needed to see a little bit more of them in this movie. Hopefully in the next one we get a lot more of them.
Yeah.
And Issa Rae, I feel like we were teased to expect more of them in this film.
Yeah.
But there's just so much going on that I'm glad we spent as much time with Miles as we did. So that's really all that I cared about, and I think that they really did a great job of. Shamik Moore did an amazing job of portraying Miles in this film. But Nicki, out of 5 cakes, what do you rate Across the Spider-Verse?
So I thoroughly enjoyed this film, and I think it has a lot of huge highs going for it. I do think it drags a little bit because this is almost 2.5 hours, but I do think the story they're telling is fantastic. It's gorgeous, and I love the performances from the cast. I'm going to give this 4 out of 5 cakes.
Nice. I don't think this movie lives, not that it doesn't live up to the first one. I think the first one for me, I still enjoyed more than this one, but this movie has spectacular highs, no pun intended. And as a comic book lover, I can't help but enjoy something that celebrates a medium that I grew up loving. I love the character of Spider-Man, and these movies really nail what it means to be a Spider-Man. So I'm going to give it 4 cakes out of 4.
Whoa, more cake.
Yes.
Double the cake.
All the cakes. And until next time, I think that's going to do it for us. If you guys liked the video, make sure to give it a huge thumbs up. If you're new to the channel, subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay up to date on all of our latest content. And until next time, guys, stay versed.